It is my joy to present somebody I have known a long time. I think he's one of the best servants that the church has. He's all the way from the West Coast, but I'm not going to hold that against him. He's a man with great courage. And I say great courage because he's got enough nerve to get on the interstates riding a motorcycle. No sense, but great courage. He has served this church extremely well. Served as the pastor of the Mother Church, Mother Bethel Church in Philadelphia, did an absolutely outstanding job. He is at the forefront of the effort for social justice in this country. And he was one of the main people in the city of Philadelphia, the state of Pennsylvania. If you want to go somewhere, you need to go see the Reverend Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler. Absolutely terrific brother. And he ran to be historiographer of the AME Church, and I think the AME Church did one of the wisest things it's ever done when they elected him our historiographer. And so planning for my first meeting, one of the first people I knew I was going to have come was Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler. Well married, a father. His daughters are getting all the money out of him he got. Those of you fathers who got daughters, you'll understand it better by and by. My daughter in here, her favorite line is, "Daddy, I need money. Ain't got a job." But I am delighted to present my friend, my brother, General Officer, Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler. Give him my hand.
All of the church say amen. Amen. Y'all need to give me a minute while I change one of my slides that I had to take out the one that said salvation is free. Yeah, I'm good now. I want to thank God for the opportunity to be here on today. And can we just thank God for your bishop? Yeah, absolutely well-deserved. Let me just say that one of the persons that was such a great inspiration to me, and especially the work that we did in Philadelphia around police oversight, we were able, with our efforts back in 2020, to dismantle, which was basically just window dressing for police oversight, and get installed real police oversight. In fact, the new executive director is an AME preacher from the 10th district that was hired all the way from Texas. But a part of what inspired that fight was all of the work that Bishop Jackson did in the state of New Jersey to really bring to heel the racial profiling and discrimination within the New Jersey State Troopers. And so now when I go back and forth from Philly to our place in Atlantic City on the New Jersey Turnpike, a lot of that ride feels a lot safer because of the work that he and the black preachers did. So thank you, Bishop, and thank you for your continued example. If we get the slideshow up, let me also thank our host pastor, Pastor Knox. Great sermon in Atlanta at the General Board meeting. I'm telling you, made us all proud. Certainly to the presiding elder cabinet of Baltimore, Washington, Virginia, North Carolina, and Western North Carolina, to any connectional officers who might be with us, or judicial council members, to all of the pastors, the clergy, the presidents of the WMS, the lay organization, RAAC, Sons of Allen, the YPD, president and director, and other leaders of the 2nd Episcopal District, and to all of you, my brothers and sisters here from the 2nd, I'm certainly glad to be here. My wife Leslie sends her regards as well. As we've both known Bishop Jackson for some time, and so we're just glad to be here with you on today. Now, Bishop Jackson has asked me to talk about African Methodism from then to now, and I want to put a tagline on there as well, subtitle, if you will, A Call to the Front Line. And in a lot of ways, Bishop, you really queued this up well. I want to thank you for it. So the next slide, Ecclesiastes 1 Verse 9, very familiar to all of us. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. You could almost say no one new as well. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are the latest iteration of persons that we have been seeing since 1619. There's nothing new. Next slide. Translation is simply this: we have been here before. So we've been here before. I felt, I think like a lot of us in this moment, we feel torn when we see Arab Americans in Dearborn crying about how they were betrayed. Or Venezuelan Americans crying that Senor Trump betrayed them. But if they listen to us, we could have told them that, some people speak with a forked tongue, as our native folk called it. Will tell you one thing and then do something different. And so it's unfortunate that people who are a little bit new in their American experience have to learn the hard way, something that all of us already have receipts for. And so we've been here before, but because we've been here before and we've faced all of those opponents that we're facing today, that also means that there's already something that we have done before. That we didn't just end up here, right? I mean, somehow we won voting rights without the right to vote. I mean, let that sink in for a moment. And it wasn't one from the north going down to save folk in the south, but people in the south with absolutely no rights. In fact, I was just looking up something on Bull Connor. And I mean, you think Trump is scary. Imagine living in Alabama, the 1950s, trying to organize voting rights with Bull Connor as sheriff, who would not only not help you if you were attacked, but would often send the people to attack you. And so we've been here before. So next slide just lifts up this. I put the AME in America because you can't spell America without AME. And so from the very beginning, we have been here. I mean, we'll have to go back to, we won't go all the way back to 1619. Let's just start at Richard Allen's birth. 1760, this is Founders Day, right? So 1760, Richard Allen is born, and at that point, the American colonies themselves are trying to begin what will become this epic struggle to become free, right? 1776 is interesting because it's the year the Declaration of Independence is signed, the war breaks out, and they're struggling now in an armed conflict to become free. But a year later, in Delaware, where Bishop Jackson comes from, Richard Allen is 17, and he too has his own Declaration of Independence, so to speak. Hearing the preaching of Freeborn Garrison, a white Methodist preacher who's been sent down to preach to anybody who will listen, including enslaved people. Richard Allen hears it, and declares, I mean, his statement almost sounds like a declaration. My dungeon shook. My chains fell off, right? So in the same way that the American colonies are throwing chains off, Richard Allen is throwing off chains, not just spiritual, but he also wants to be free. And so what does he do to become free? How does he earn his money? We talk about the fact that he worked in, this extra job to make money to buy his freedom from Stokely Sturgis, the person who owned him at that time. He earns money by hauling salt for the Revolutionary Army. I mean, so as they are fighting for freedom, he is using their fight to make money to get his own personal freedom. So he gets his freedom right about the same time that the war is ended, 1783. They both become free, Richard Allen and the United States. But it goes a little bit deeper. So in 1784, the Methodist Episcopal Church decides that it wants to be its own American entity. And so it doesn't want to follow John Wesley's advice of trying to be a reform body for the Anglican Church, which is about to become now known as the Episcopal Church. They say we want to be totally separate. We want our own church. And so they called in the 2nd District up there in Baltimore the Christmas Conference in 1784. And all of the Methodists gathered to have their initial general conference. That's what it will become known as. But in the room are a couple of black preachers in heavy speculation that Richard Allen is one of them, right? And so they organize and they get together and they create the Methodist Church. One of the most inspiring moments for Richard Allen and Harry Hoosier and anybody else black who heard about what happened later, whether they were there or not, is what the Methodists put in that first discipline. That you cannot be a member in good standing if you own slaves, if you buy slaves, if you sell slaves. If you don't do anything other than try to free slaves, then you cannot be a member of the Methodist Church. See, one of the questions people often have is, well, why did Richard Allen stay with the Methodists? Why didn't he go with Absalom Jones and others? And, because after the Methodists treated them so bad. But for Richard Allen, he understood that whatever failures the Methodist Church in America would have going forward had nothing to do with the ideal. It was with the practice. Because the ideal came from the founder, John Wesley, who was deeply an abolitionist. Right? And so Richard Allen held on to that. So 1784, they say that nobody who owns slaves is welcome as you can join, you can be a part, but you will not be considered in full membership as a disciple within in what would become the United Methodist Church. Yet, by 1787, 3 years later, the walkout happens. Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, they walk out in St. George's. Same thing happened in Baltimore, at Lovely Lane. Same thing happens in Salem, New Jersey, and New York City, and wherever. In fact, Charleston would happen there in like 1814, 1815, wherever there are Methodist churches where blacks are brought in and initially made to feel welcome. So everybody sits in wherever you want. The preacher is the best person for the job, and all of that. But by 1787, Allen and others are forced to leave. What happened? How does a church go from making such a bold declaration in December, Christmas Day, 1784, and then by the third Sunday in November of 1787, black folk feel so bad about the place that they got to walk out en masse? I'll tell you what happened, in my opinion. America.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the first compromises this country made to become a country and to keep the 13 colonies together was made at our expense.
Wow.
Within the Constitution, there are 3 clauses written that deal with black folk and slavery. You don't find the word slavery, but it's in there. Even the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, the first one was in 1793, but even before the first Fugitive Slave Act that said if you escape, slave catchers can come and get you, there is a fugitive slave clause written in the Constitution. Wow. But it says, if you are in service to people in one state and escape to another state, you don't shake off your servitude because you're now standing in a new place. It follows you. And they have a right to come and get you. Now the service they're talking about, we call that slavery, Reverend Lamar. And so September, I'm not a constitutional historian, but I think it was September 1787 is when the Constitution is ratified and affirmed and they're good with the green light. 2 months later, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and everybody else walk into St. George's and realize that the rules have changed without warning. St. George's is about 6 blocks from where the Constitution was ratified. Many of the signers of the Declaration and the original Congress all went to Philadelphia churches in that neighborhood. And so Richard Allen and others go into a place that has gone from welcoming and a strong anti-slavery stance to black people go to the back and sit. Though you helped fill this church up after we gave you a terrible preaching appointment of 5 a.m. in the morning and you still grew the church for us. And you all have helped us raise money, but now you must go to the back. Listen, I want to argue that, next slide please, that this is a part of America's tortured soul, right? That when the country could have made a decision in the very beginning to live up to the ideal of we the people, and that everyone is created equal under the eyes of God and under the eyes of law, instead, it cut a deal. Yeah. And has been paying the price for it ever since. Wow. Right. And that in so many ways, this is a Methodist story. Because the Methodist Church, when it could have shown leadership, it didn't transform its mind, it conformed with the world around it. Wow. Wow. It did the opposite of Scripture. And instead of leading elected officials with a different model in churches, the churches, almost without exception, I mean, y'all think Quakers and all that and the Friends were all good. You need to read up on the Quakers, because they weren't all friendly. They got their own racial history and racial problems as well. And almost to the number, all of these white churches turn on us. But in the Methodist Church, it's almost like following the American story. Start off welcome, flip the rules, and even though it says it in paper for years that you still can't own slaves, mission creep lets in, and as the white Methodist power brokers like Asbury and others discover that they're going to lose this southern money, these big plantation owners who send money up from slave goods to fill up the church with tithes and offerings, who said that if you really mean what you say, that we can't own slaves, then fine, we'll be Baptist. We'll be Episcopalian, we'll be Lutheran, we just won't go to church. And so Asbury said, well, you know, I mean, you know, it says it, but we can kind of work around it in certain exceptions, right? And they kicked and punt all the way to 1844. And by 1844, I'm calling United Methodist Church, it was the Methodist Episcopal Church, splits and has its own civil war 15, 16 years before the real Civil War. It breaks apart over slavery. A Methodist bishop gets married to a woman who owns slaves, he refuses to let them go, and the church falls apart and 2 new churches are started. There were always two churches to begin with. The Methodist church's tortured soul. And black folk on the outside looking, and Richard Allen them, the people who came behind Richard Allen, he's dead by now, by 1844, is probably looking like I told you so. That's why we left, because y'all can't get it together. Now they've gone back and forth through the years. It's interesting to me, just as an aside, that they just split again. In a time where racial tension and violence has not been this high in probably 100 years. Let's pray that what happened in 1844 doesn't follow today. But it is certainly something to say that that particular church seems to always be in lockstep with what is happening in the culture as it relates to black folk, especially. Wow. Right? So talking about this tortured soul. So, next slide will just show you a little bit. This is actually from the 1792 discipline of the Methodist Church. Just wanted you to see it there. The F is S back then. The buying or selling of men, women, or children with an intention to enslave them. These are part of the general rules, that all Methodists have. So all the things you can't do. Can't profane the Lord's name, no drunkenness, no fighting, no buying or selling goods on the Lord's day. But right there in the middle as well is that you can't buy or sell men and women to be slaves. That's, I think, why Richard Allen stayed Methodist, that even if his white counterparts in the U.S. were not holding up to it, that he understood the ideal. Probably why many of our parents and ancestors decided to stay in America when they had a chance to leave. Constitution says one thing, Declaration says one thing, they do something else, but we're fighting for an ideal and trying to make them hold true to what they say. So, next slide. So, recurring white resentment and violence toward black Americans. And let me pivot just a little bit, but kind of keeping all of what I just said in mind, the tension of that. It appears to me that since the early 1800s, that every 100 years or so, we get to a point where there is an outburst, not just of violence, but violence that is rooted in white resentment at black success. I mean, don't sleep. Part of what gave rise and made Donald Trump possible is Barack Obama's election. I mean, if you are a person that doesn't want to see black success, nothing says success like a two-term black president who's extremely, not just successful, but extremely popular even to this day, right? So go back 100 years, so here we are in 2025. Feeling extremely unsafe, feeling extremely vulnerable, and just not really knowing what will happen next, right? I mean, just every day, these executive orders, rolling back everything. DEI, can't teach black history, just every single thing that is within his power that any other president would have just never even had too much decency to try to do, he is just doing, right? Rolling it all back. 100 years ago, roughly, in 1921, was what became known as the Tulsa Race Massacre. And I want to posit that the AME Church is always in the center of it. I mean, I find it interesting that right now, one of the big stories in all of this white resentment is found in Washington, D.C. at an AME church. Right? Beautiful press conference, by the way. But 100 years ago, it was Vernon Chapel AME Church. If you talk to the folk there, the only thing that didn't burn in Greenwood and Tulsa was the church, right? And so 100 years ago, roughly, the Tulsa race riot happens because black people have created what they have deemed Black Wall Street. And they're not content with just one night of rioting, but they're not going to stop until they've destroyed everything that black folk have built, even under Jim Crow rules. My late grandfather was about 6 years old and lived not far from there in the Norman, Oklahoma City area. And our family, as soon as the Great Migration started, everybody left Oklahoma. Only story he could remember to tell me when I asked him about telling him about growing up was when the Klan came to his house and rode around and breaking out windows when his father wasn't home. His mother was there by herself with the kids. That's Oklahoma. But 100 years before that, and I talked about this last year when I was here, but I want to revisit this particular story because I think I want to look at it from a different kind of way. But 100 years before that was Cincinnati, Ohio. And at that time, there was another race massacre that happened in an area called Over the Rhine. Over the Rhine is still down there now. Over the Rhine, if you're familiar with Cincinnati, and right next to it at that time was called Little Africa. But over the Rhine now, you gotta have $10 to buy a cup of coffee. It's gentrified completely. But when I was there in 2000, it was still kind of like, a deep part of the African-American experience. And so in 1829 in Cincinnati, again, black workers pouring into Cincinnati, doing extremely well in their chosen fields and vocations and blowing up, and it creates a riot that becomes a massacre, led by white immigrants. Like Elon Musk is an immigrant. Donald Trump's the grandson of an immigrant. Don't you find it funny as people who, most of us, because we can't even really reliably trace it, but if your family goes back to the period of slavery, your family has probably been here at least 200 years or more, at least, at the very least, right? To hear people who just got here talking about give me my country back. Like, bro, you missed the Civil War, World War I, World War II. It's not just our country. We fought, bled, died for it. We got veterans and all. Come on, man, stop it. And so this recurring white resentment and white violence is often started by folk who are new arrivals who are trying to compete with black people for jobs. And you add a dose of racism in it, doesn't help. And so, next slide, what I want to talk about then is the roadmap from the past. So Bishop Allen and the Black Convention movement that's rooted in the story I just told. So if we've been here before, and we agree to that, then what do we need to do going forward? And I would argue we've got to learn from what we've done in the past, all right? Now, since I was here last year and I talked about this, I've actually used this story in a few presentations in other Episcopal districts. I don't have to go over a lot of ground. You'll recall that after the Cincinnati race massacre, where of 2,000 black people in the city, almost 1,500 left and never returned. Wow. They just left, went to Canada because they were shook. Throughout the free part of America in 1829, that race massacre sent such a chill down the spine of black people that black people in Newark, in Camden, New Jersey, in Philadelphia, in parts of Connecticut and Rhode Island and Boston, wherever black people were free, Columbus, Pittsburgh, it said to them that if that can happen in Cincinnati, it can happen to us. Wow. Yeah. Because the police sat back for days and refused to help as blacks were being killed in the streets and property was being destroyed. And so people felt extremely uncertain and folk didn't really know what to do. So one of the first things that happens is David Walker's appeal is written. So y'all have seen David Walker's appeal, and David Walker's appeal historical document that if you were found with it and you were enslaved, they'd probably kill you. It was such a revolutionary document. But in the document, one of the things he does is talks about how important Bishop Richard Allen is. Man, he hypes Bishop Allen up. Talks about how great Bishop Allen is. Now, in 1829, Allen is less than 2 years away from passing away. 69 years old when the race massacre happens. And there's a guy out of Baltimore named Hezekiah Grice. You remember that name from last year? He was a publisher. Hezekiah Grice in his opinion, is like, I'm a nobody. Like, nobody knows me. Unless you're in Baltimore, you don't really know who I am. I don't have a national name or anything like that, but I got an idea. The idea is that we need a black convention to come together so that we can talk about what happened in Cincinnati and plan and strategize so it doesn't happen in our cities. And if it does, what do? We need a black convention, not just one, but we need multiple black conventions. We need a black convention movement. Think kind of Tavis Smiley's State of the Black, Black America. Y'all remember those? They used to be really good before he went off the rails. Y'all know I'm telling the truth. Obama's election didn't just do something to Trump, it did something to a lot of people. Poor Tavis, never came back. But Tavis did a great thing with this State of Black America. So imagine what that was in the early 1800s. And so the Black Convention movement gets started because of what happens in Cincinnati. But this is the part that I want to lift up for today, and I'm so glad that I'm here with the chair of the Social Action Commission of the AME Church, who's a social justice warrior, because every presentation I've done this year, I've been calling his name. And I want to tell you that this is so important for where we are right now. Hezekiah Grice writes to Richard Allen. He says, I'm not a member of your church. You don't know me. I'm telling you, I get it if you just throw this in the trash. We need to get together as black folk. And he said, if I call a meeting, ain't nobody gonna show up but the Grice family. He said, but if you, the bishop of the AME Church, the most well-known black person in America, call a meeting in Philadelphia, everybody will show up. You got weight like that. Remarkably, Richard Allen agrees. And in 1830, the first black convention is held in Philadelphia. Richard Allen is elected the president. I'm telling you, listen to this, it's like the summer or so. He dies in March of the next year. He had to know that he was coming to the end. I mean, why take something else on? All the battles Richard Allen fought, he'd been fighting since the time he arrived in Philadelphia in 1783, 1784. And now in 1830, here's this young person writing to him saying, fight one more battle. Would have been so easy for him to say no and walk away. But instead, Bishop Allen agrees and sends out the notice, and people show up. And as I said last year, they don't just show up once, but the Black Convention movement lasts the entire rest of the 19th century. Doesn't die until the early 1900s, and as I said, it really doesn't die if you think about it, because everything that they said we should be about gets picked up by other new inventions for black folk, black fraternities and sororities, black Masons and black Eastern Stars, HBCUs. NAACP gets started about that time, the Urban League, and everybody, if you look at what everybody says their mission statement is, it almost looks like you can lay it on top of the original thing that Richard Allen wrote for the Black Convention movement in 1830. It's not new. Here's the point for us. Next slide. This is the real implication, I believe, that in that moment, when black folk knew they needed direction. It's not like people didn't have ideas. It's not like that they couldn't do it without the AME Church and all of that. But what they recognized was that because of who the AME Church was, the credibility that it brought on these issues, right? The AMEs had been boycotting enslaved labor goods for years. They had been calling in writing for an end of slavery. They had been working off, before there was Underground Railroad, they were helping black folk get free. So people knew that Richard Allen and the AME Church didn't just talk about this. This is who they were. It's our wheelhouse. You know, frustrates me, Bishop, when we try to you can't out Creflo. You ain't gonna never be able to raise money like Creflo. That's his wheelhouse. He was born with a last name Dollar. Come on now. He got a head start. But that's his gift. That's his calling. That's what God called him to do, and so it works for him. But when we walk away from who we are, I mean, the presentation we just heard, the plenary, the church at its best, and when you put that with tomorrow, the world at its worst, that we are made for times like this. That as other people are trying to figure out, like, well, what should we do? Where can we go? What? Oh man, I'm clutching my pearls, I'm wringing my hands. I don't know, we should just give up. I mean, Rosa Parks was an AME stewardess. She didn't just figure out to sit on that bus. She was inspired Sunday after Sunday, sitting through preaching from bold preachers who were not afraid to talk about racism and white supremacy from a pulpit. A. Philip Randolph, union organizer, who was really the brains behind the March on Washington.
Yeah.
He got that from being in an AME church every Sunday, growing up with that as a part of his ethos, his culture, his worldview. He was surrounded by church school teachers and youth directors who poured that into him. It's who we are. And so here we are right now in 2025 and don't nobody know what to do. We already know what to do. And people trust us on this issue. They do. When I was pastoring in Philadelphia, or when I was pastoring in Jefferson City, or when I was pastoring in La Jolla, wherever I end up finding myself pastoring, when things like this happen, like when they burned a cross in Oxford, Ohio, when I was pastor at Bethel in Oxford, and we got together as a community, where do folk come to our church? And they were like, Mark, what should we do? Because they trust us. And I know that my testimony is not, that I'm not by myself. People have gone to you. You know, they expect us to do this. Listen, I was arguing with some young Black Lives Matter protesters. They weren't even BLM. They were like so radical. BLM was too vanilla for them. This is Philly. Philly always got 2 or 3 everything. So Black Lives Matter, 2 chapters of Black Lives Matter. Then there was this coalition that was like, you know, they want to burn everything down. They did. They wanted to abolish the police instantly that day. I was like, what you gonna do? Like, it's 1.5 million people. The elders will work it out. I said, the elders, people robbing right now? Like, anyway. So, but we got into this thing in a town hall, and the town hall was over. I'm trying to leave, and these young people all in my face, back in 2015 or so. And they were like, you black preachers. You know, the usual, y'all are homophobic, you're this, you're that. And I'm like, you know, they just give me all this grief. And I said, I am literally out here with you all on every single march. What march have you done where you have not seen me? I said, me, and I'm gonna name all these other ones. And I go through this whole thing, and they say to me, Bill, they say, that's what you're supposed to do. Like Dave Chappelle or somebody. I was like, they don't go to church. Hey, you know, I don't know what they believe. But they believe that I'm supposed to be out there. By extension, you all are supposed to be out there. Right? I mean, that's crazy because my white rabbi friends didn't carry that burden. My white Protestant preacher friends don't carry that burden. Even my black friends who are imams don't carry that burden. And a lot of black church pastors who are kind of into something different don't carry that burden. But because I'm the pastor of Mother Bethel, the AME church, that's what I'm supposed to do. Listen. That's you know, forget how we see ourselves. The way people see us is that in moments like this, where there's so much hostility toward black folk, and there's so much anti-black hatred and attacks upon us on TV, on social media, and often in reality, that people expect us to show up. We can't shake that off. As the late Bishop Henning would say, it's in our DNA. And so we can't lose it, so we should embrace it. And so how then do we do that? Let me give you 4 quick things. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. So the first thing is this. Boycotts are fine. Let's go back. Oh, yeah, go forward, please. Boycotts are good. Boycotts are okay. But they have to be targeted.
That's right. That's right.
In Philadelphia, the greatest civil rights preacher of the last generation was the Reverend Leon Sullivan, who was a Baptist preacher. They called him the Lion of Zion. Zion Baptist Church. He was a West Virginia native, and but just tremendous. In fact, Dr. King lifted Operation Breadbasket from Sullivan's work, because he came to Philly and said, "How'd you do it?" So they were not hiring black people to work at a company called Tasty Cakes. Y'all heard Tasty Cakes? Just made somebody hungry. Tasty Cakes is from Philly. They weren't hiring black folk. So Reverend Sullivan said, let's go negotiate. Talk to the folk. They were like, we ain't hiring. No. I mean, you think Philly would be progressive, right? Philly can be very racist at times. And especially in the 50s and 60s. These jobs are for white people only. Not gonna hire your people, our people won't support it. So Sullivan and others said, we're gonna buy everybody else's desserts, but we're not buying Tasty Cakes. And we're gonna get all the churches and pastors that we can to sign up, and we're gonna shut them down. And black folks stopped buying Tasty Cake. So long that Tasty Cake gave in and buckled under pressure. Started hiring black drivers, black folk in the office, blacks in corporate, and they didn't realize, I don't know why we didn't hire black people before. We were missing out on talent. And then when Tasty Cake failed, they went to the next target. And to the next target. You see, they didn't have a shotgun. Now, let me just tell you a pet peeve of mine. I'm fine with, if we're gonna boycott Target, cool, let's boycott Target. But understand, you got some black vendors who make their living off of being in Target. So you can't have a shotgun approach when you need a rifle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Amen.
In Cincinnati in 2000, there was the killing of a young man, Tim Thomas. I had just moved to Cincinnati, and man, the city erupted like Ferguson, but worse. It was horrible. A lot of people forget that incident. And so when it was over, never forget, young cat who kind of got to the airways first, and he kind of took advantage of the vacuum because nobody stepped in. And he said, we gonna shut down downtown Cincinnati. Don't nobody shop in Cincinnati's downtown. And they caught on. Problem is, you had some black businesses in downtown, including the most popular restaurant called Cafe Chin Chin, which in a few months was closed and gone and never came back. You killed your own business. When if you were selective, you could have said, we ain't gonna shop downtown with anybody except Cafe Chin Chin and these other restaurants and other businesses, which also would have made a stronger case about your economic power. That you have these companies prospering in the midst of others struggling because you're targeting your selection.
Yeah.
So how do we get to selective patronage in this moment? I think this is where the AME Church can be helpful. So when our bishops talk about, what the plan is with CME bishops, AME Zion bishops, Kojic bishops, and Baptists, they don't call them bishops, but they act like bishops. The national progressives, that when you pull those mainline black denominations together and sit down, and then those other churches that are kind of off by themselves, but almost are denominations by themselves, like our own brother from the second, Pastor Brian, who's down in Atlanta at New Birth, that you pull all of them together, you see, and then we say collectively, this is who we're targeting, this is when we're targeting, this is when we'll know to stop targeting. Y'all remember the NFL boycott? Came out of Alabama, of all places. Some black preachers in Alabama meant well. They never said, all they said was, we're going to boycott until Colin Kaepernick get a job. Does that mean if Kaepernick is 60 years old, wouldn't get a job, even if he could get a job? You understand? It's like, no, it's an open-ended boycott. it has to be strategic. And that's what our history tells us. That Richard Allen and others didn't just boycott cotton or boycott produce. They boycotted the things that were made by enslaved labor. They were selective. Next slide. We need to open our churches to tell our own story. Listen, Black History Month didn't start with the U.S. government executive order. It started as a week by Carter G. Woodson that then picked up and carried on so well that it became a month. Before the government started recognizing what we did our own stuff. I'm part of a group conversation, and so a lot of the guys in the group that ride with are veterans, and they were saying how, if there are any vets in the room, you may have heard this, that in a lot of these recruiting efforts now that the new part of this Trump plan is to stop intentionally recruiting Black people to the military, which has been usually a pathway to the middle class and everything else, leadership opportunities. I said, well, Black former retired military folk ought to act like HBCU alumni. And go to the church and bring young folk in and explain to them what a career opportunity might look like in the military. Like, you're retired, can't nobody tell you what to do with your time? We can tell our own story. Listen, we own more property than anybody else that I know of as a Black entity. And we're in every single community. We're in rural communities, suburban communities, inner cities. And so our churches ought to be places where we have the new Freedom School that's telling our history, that's telling our story, that's framing this moment for our people. And so if they want to run it out of public schools, fine, we'll put it right back in the church where it came from in the first place. The third thing, and I'm almost done. The third thing is this: make the most of our connection. We often brag about being a connectional church, and it's true, we are a connectional church. How many of you now have friends in another, before you raise your hand, but who have friends who are in another country only because you met them in the AME church? Let me see. Most of your friends can't say that. They don't know anybody in Africa. They don't have deep relationships with folk in the Caribbean or South America or in Europe. And we have, these are not just like I see you at a meeting. These are like when I see something happen in Malawi, man, I'm calling somebody. Like, y'all good? And if they see something happen in Philadelphia, they calling me, you good? Because we know each other. So if we have an international church, 39 countries on 5 continents, we should realize that the folk who are trying to hurt us in this country are not going to stop with our country. Elon Musk is the son of an apartheid era father who got his wealth by extracting it from Black jewels in South Africa. And guess who they're targeting now? The nation of South Africa, the Republic of South Africa. If y'all don't play ball and give us the minerals because we hear you're oppressing white farmers. So how do we then make this connection real in this moment? I just want to lift that up. But then the final thing is this: stand with those who need us most. There's a nice meme out there with 4 Black women drinking coffee on a rooftop, watching the city burn. Y'all seen that meme? It's perfect. In other words, it doesn't even say anything. It's like, don't come to us, because we already tried, right? Yeah, so there's a moment for that where we kind of feel that. But the truth be told, our own self-interest, even if we don't do it because it's the right thing, our own self-interest calls for it. Right. Because if you don't stand with people who are being hurt in a moment just because it's the right thing, you may look around and nobody's left for you. Yeah. Bishop just talked about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Next slide. I want to lift this up to close out this point. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one of the unlucky ones. Christian preacher who stood up to Hitler and Nazism and lost his life. One of the lucky ones was the Reverend Martin Niemöller, who was a Lutheran preacher, German, Kind of, he looked like he should have been all right. But ended up in a concentration camp nonetheless. Kept his head down, just ignored it all, watched everybody else get screwed over, and still almost lost his life. And when the war was over, he wrote this famous poem. This is one version of it. I mean, there are 1,000 versions of it. Folk had their own. But it essentially says, first they came for the communists, but I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the communists. I didn't speak out because I'm the socialists. I didn't speak out. And they came for the Jews. I didn't speak out because I was a Christian. They came for the Catholics. I didn't speak out because I was a Protestant. And then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak. This should not be our testimony. Because if there's anybody crazy enough to believe that folk want to stop with Mexicans and Guatemalans and Muslims and trans people and queer people, and then somehow get to us and be like, oh, y'all cool. If you and I could be dragged off the street in ICE vans today, we would be. If there was a way that they could wave a wand and get rid of the constitutional amendment to take away the right that we have to be American citizens, we would be on ships and planes if we're lucky. So don't ever think that this is not about us too. And even if it's not about us, wrong is wrong.
Yes, sir.
Then how can we sit back? I mean, Jesus stayed in trouble because he was always getting in somebody's business.
Yeah.
Like, why you helping that woman out caught in adultery? Ain't got nothing to do with you. You say, well, where's the man? That this is, that if we're going to be the church, we got to be the church. All right. And so next slide. And this is what I want to end with on this. That thing around your neck. When we were in Ferguson back in 2015, Reverend Gould, where's she? There she is, my sister. She called us to Ferguson. And her and Reverend Tracy Blackman and others, we didn't know what we were getting into. I remember the morning I flew in that the people who picked me up early that morning were looking shocked. I mean, just shell-shocked. Walking around in a daze. I'm like, man, what'd I fly down here for? I mean, seriously, by the end of that next night, I knew what I had gotten into. I'd never seen so many police with guns drawn on people. Am I lying, son? I mean, it was a rectangle that they said, it was a 2-block rectangle. Maybe I might be wrong, but it felt about 2 long blocks, which you could protest. And if you stopped walking, you'd be arrested. Walk you until you just fell out. And I mean, the entire perimeter the wall was police with guns out. Bunch of old people and kids marching. I mean, then there was a backup group, like about 200 or 300 cops, 2 blocks away that I passed. I'm like, my God. So one night, after it was over, Reverend Michael McBride, good friend of ours, he's director of Live Free Now, and Reverend Al Herring came in. We were staying at one of the seminaries, Eden or something. And so, man, they just looked, they were like, oh my God. And so Al says, or maybe it was Mike, he said, listen, we just had an experience out there. Said, we saw some kids, they were being harassed by police. We walked up, cops walked off, and the kids saw them and said, man, what just happened? Now, mind you, we were all wearing clergy collars to identify ourselves. Not that that really helped out in Ferguson, but we just to be identified. And so they said, so the kids said, man, what's that thing around your neck? They're like, oh, what, Al and Mike thinking like, they don't really know St. Louis like that. I pastored in Jeff City. I knew there were plenty of kids who ain't never even been in a church. And collars are not all that, common for clergy out there. And they said, what thing? And they realized they're talking about their clergy collar. They said, well, I don't know about all that. All I know is when y'all walked up with them things around your neck, the police started acting different. The police walked away. The police backed up because y'all walked up with them things around your neck. Can I tell you, if you don't believe the power that God has given you, you may as well put it on down, because when we walk in a room, things ought to change. When we walk in a situation, things ought to change. When we walk into the courthouse or to the White House, wherever, things ought to change. Why? Because that thing around your neck. I'm telling you that there is still power in the name of Jesus. And in the name of Jesus, demons shall tremble. Keep wearing that thing around your neck. I'm telling you, I'm done. I'm done. I am done. Well, let's give God some praise. So I've got time for some questions, and I certainly want to open it up for you, and I want to thank you for that. And again, I really want to thank your bishop for, really just for not just the example, but for the encouragement. I'm reminded of Bobby Donaldson. Dr. Bobby Donaldson is doing a lot of research and history on the Black church, and particularly the AME church in South Carolina. And he talks about the effort or the effect of Bishop Frank Madison Reed I in South Carolina, that so many people became a part of the civil rights movement, naming churches like Bishop James and Bishop Grady and so many other names, because of the fact that the bishop, using his position, encouraged people to be out there. And so this was different with us. Right? I mean, you can get in trouble for a lot of stuff as an AME pastor, but you are never going to get in trouble because you're out on the side of justice, fighting for your community. You're going to be supported. So I'm going to open up for Q&As. The microphone right here. If there are any questions, it's open for you right there. Thank you. Come on down if you don't mind.
Good evening, and thank you for your presentation. It's been wonderful. I'm looking for primary documents that we can do more research for. Where would you recommend that we go? We want to tell the story. We want to tell the story of the lay as well as the bishops, but we're looking for primary sources. Can you refer to that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, let me just give you one source that will really get you started. It's documenting the American South. If you just put that in as a keyword search, documenting the American South. Say one more time, documenting the American South. It is it's a wealth of primary documents. It was a effort that was done by the Ford Foundation and some others, where they basically, in University of North Carolina, they have transcribed into a searchable database, a ton of books from the 19th century, including AME History 1, AME History 2, the original AME Discipline from 1817, the book autobiographies of Bishop Wayman, Bishop Payne, James Handy. I'm telling you, it's like documents upon documents. And so the lay, you can certainly take a look there and you'll find stories of lay people. Think even R.R. Wright's first Encyclopedia of African Methodism is there, so you get to see the pictures and everything else. It's searchable, it's free. You can cut and paste each book into a Word document of your own and have it. So I'll give you that. Yep. Yes?
Dr. Todd, I wanted to say thank you for your presentation. As a historian and social studies teacher, I kind of ate it all up, took a whole bunch of notes. I wanted to ask, how is the intersection of capitalism and systemic racism influence the Black church's role in social justice, especially as it relates to our current political business?
Yeah, so listen, a lot of our, the Black church is not a monolith, first and foremost. So we know that in this room, but from the outside, people think we say the Black church, you're talking about everybody. But Black churches are very different. And that's why I said that we have a very unique place that works well for us. But there are a number of churches that operate kind of like the system that has held black folk down, right? Where the bottom line is money at the end of the year, and money that, almost looks like a pyramid scheme in some places. It looks like a major corporation. Look, some congregations, not like a denomination, a congregation that can buy a pastor a top of the line jet. You asked the question about the intersection, right? Well, so will that church be prone to risk that by speaking out? You see? Because speaking out, Bishop he nailed it. There is a cost to what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Everybody want to be in a controversial church. A lot of members, don't want to be there because it's like, our pastor always talking about that social justice stuff. I just want to get my praise on. So the church operates like this little miniature capitalistic experiment where everything's okay in here. It's utopia, it's paradise. We're an escape from the world. But we're not here trying to offer an escape. We're trying to find ways for people to navigate and tear down this stuff. And so to do that means that you got to be willing that, I've been uninvited to stuff before. Sometimes the elected officials in Philly love me. Sometimes they don't. They just try to put a stadium up for the 76ers arena. They want to move Chinatown out. And my friends were like, why are you talking about that, man? You ain't Chinese. I said, do you think if they gonna move Chinatown out, that they won't come for North Philly? Like, dude, Chinatown? Like, they were literally gonna move Chinatown, you all, to put the Sixers there because that's what they wanted. They fast-tracked it. Black elected officials. And we stood against them, they still did it. And guess what happened? The 76ers at the end cut a deal with Comcast, stayed where they were, and made all of them look like fools. So, but a lot of churches in that moment did not do it because of that intersection of capitalism that you're talking about. And it was not in their financial best interest to stand on the side of right. To stand on the side of right means that you have to be willing to lose that stuff. And in the end, understand that God will pick you up. All right, yes, next question. Great question, though.
Good afternoon. My question is, you asked us or suggested that we be strategic in our targets, and we are planning to boycott Target, opposed to just boycotting Target. Is there a way, or could you give us some suggestions on how to be strategic in our targets opposed to the shotgun?
Well, I think that it takes, first of all, the person whose name keeps coming up for me in all of this is Bill Dickens. Bill is a layperson out of the 5th District, out of the Northwest Conference. Some of you all know Bill. He is, a world-renowned economist. He's like one of the most respected black economists that there is. I'm saying, go talk to people like that, because what happens is, so as preachers, there was a time where we were probably kind of the most educated people in a congregation. That's not the case anymore. So our expertise is in organizing and motivating and moving people, but to develop that plan, we need to talk to people who actually know better. Right. So an economist will tell you where the pressure point is, I would imagine, and will also tell you how you do this with causing the least amount of pain to black people who also depend upon the very thing. Again, there's a black woman who has a new line at Target. This is what got me thinking about it. Somebody, I didn't even know. They were like, y'all know that's gonna kill her. And I was like, I didn't even, so what you don't wanna do is in punishing companies that don't support us by rolling back DEI, making sure that we have actually researched and studied it. And let's use our people who know. Yes, sir.
Dr. Tyler, great presentation. I've heard a lot of interesting comments made today. I also heard my bishop say on Monday, along with saying something, we need to do something.
Yeah.
One of the challenges, as I see it, and you said, take advantage of the connection. Right now in America, we no longer have a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't think we have a recognized leader for the black race. But as the AME Church, my prayer is hopefully someone is in a room working up a strategy, because we are in terrible times, so that we can have a voice we can listen to and all rally around. Because the worst thing that we can do is all go out and start doing our independent, individual things. Do you have any insight on where do we go from here? How do we get there from here?
Well, I appreciate the question. So again, like I said, I believe that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And maybe it's a good thing we don't have one leader. That, because when Dr. King was assassinated, it's almost like you put a period at the civil rights movement. It was like it was over. You know, everybody just kind of walked away like, oh, that's done, on to the next thing. But we have institutions that can operate together in concert. And that's why I said, again, I mean, we're looking at one of the leaders right here, Bishop Jackson. And I mean, really, because, you know, on the issue of social justice, this is not new for him. And so within his own within the Council of Bishops, I'm sure people look and say, if we want to talk about social justice, we look at Bishop Jackson. Al Sharpton is one of the major voices, but he understands he can't do nothing without AME. I mean, you start kind of going right on down the list that a lot of what I think people are looking for, we offer. And so nobody has to be the only voice out there, but we have to like figure out how to work together in concert, because at the end of the day, the goal is what's most important, right? And you know, look, don't sleep. There's a young white guy named Robbie Starbuck. You heard that name? Not Starbucks, the company. He ain't got nothing to do with Starbucks. Robbie Starbuck. And he is the person who almost single-handedly took down John Deere, Caterpillar, Harley Davidson, everybody else. All these companies start rolling back DEI. This is more about him than it is even Trump. Because what he started doing was he did selective patronage in reverse. That's right. And said, you know what, y'all got DEI? We ain't supporting you no more. They just giving jobs away to these black people. Tear them down. They boycotted. And each company buckled. All Robbie Starbucks got to do is go to somebody and say, we coming for you. And they get scared and they run. So that's what I'm saying. You need experts who also understand the bigger picture at play. This is not just about one elected official. It's about this larger resentment and how we handle it. So thank you. One last question right there.
Afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Tyler, for your presentation. I am Reverend Angela Christina Bullock from the Baltimore Conference. My question, Freedom's Prophet by Richard S. Newman, is one of the most extensive works that I have read about Bishop Richard Allen and the work that he's done for the church and the world. I wanted to know, are there any other books out there that are written from the lens of Black people concerning our culture and our experience?
Well, let me just say this, that, and I appreciate Newman's work. Newman's a friend of mine, but I've often said that there are so many people, heroes and heroines in our journey that are worthy of somebody to write about. And, you know, so there are aspiring researchers out there. Think about writing about some of them. You know, I was really afraid that, like, you know, some nice white lady was going to write Jarena Lee's story first. But Nyasha Jr., Dr. Nyasha Jr. is, I think, close to finishing a book on Jarena Lee. And she comes out of the AME Church as well. Dr. Jr., some of you have heard her speak, tremendous scholar. I can't wait to read what she finishes. But I mean, that just scratches the surface. They're just so, I mean, they're just so many of them. And so we need to make sure that that we are the ones who are writing those stories ourselves, all right? But yes, there's a lot. I don't have a bibliography in front of me, but yeah, there are some things out there, but I really want to push us to go back and look at those fascinating people out there. I mean, just so many names of people who just come out of the AME Church, especially in the 19th century, that their lives and their stories could be an inspiration for us going forward as well. So thank you. Let me give you a last seed of hope, and before I hand this over to Bishop, that in this moment of great despair that feels like everybody's against us, there's still reasons to hope. I was on a flight going from I think the 6th district to the 9th district, doing some Founders Day stuff. And so on the short flight from Savannah, somehow I got a middle seat. I was so upset. I did not look at my ticket. I thought I'd never do that. And two big guys on both sides. I'm like, man, it's too, come on, man. Somebody need to do something, bail us out. But they didn't. So we sitting on that plane. And these two guys are friends, a couple of white guys. We're all about the same age. And they were watching the Fox News stuff. And the energy was just so bad. The whole flight. It was just bad. I'm like, none of us wanted to be there. Not just because it was 3, on a row, but I just felt it. And I got off that flight, Bishop, and I'm walking through Atlanta Airport to the lounge waiting for my next flight. And I'm thinking, man, I'm just looking at every white person like, was it you? Was it you? You did it too. You voted for him? I'm just like feeling like I was in a bad mood. I told the story at Bill Campbell's church the other day. Get to the lounge and I'm sitting there, dressed kind of like I am now, with a bow tie. And I'm sitting there about to eat, and this white lady looked like she's from the Midwest, dressed like a librarian or something, comes and gets right in my face. And I got all this on my mind, and she just kneels down in my face. And I'm like, why are you all in my face? Who are you? And she says, are you Senator Warnock? Melody, I said, all those black preachers, Dr. Joanne, we all look alike. I know bald glasses, bow tie, Alpha, went to the AUC. I said, no, I'm not Raphael. I said, he's my friend. And wait till I'm gonna text him and tell him that you did this. And she said, I'm sorry, but if you were him, I just wanted to tell him, keep up the good fight. She said, that's all I wanted to tell him. And I said, she doesn't know how much I needed that. The reminder that it's not everybody. Now there's many white folk in this country as black folk who are deeply offended in this moment, who are committed to diversity, who are committed to inclusion, who are committed to equity, who are committed to moving this country in a different direction. And this country has always moved forward. Even though we have people who pop up who try to drag us backward. The history is one that even if it's not as fast as we wanted at times, one that moves forward because God moves forward. And so I want to thank her for that. I'm going to leave you with the words of Bishop Allen on this Founders Day. These were his words in the late 1820s, not long before he died, in an answer to the question, should we just pack up and leave America? And he said, this land, which we have watered with our tears and our blood, is now our mother country, and we are well satisfied to stay where wisdom abounds and the gospel is free. Happy Founders Day, 2nd District.
Let me thank Dr. Mark Kelly for an absolutely wonderful presentation. Very relevant, very impactful. And I think that's something all of us can take something from. I really, really want to thank him.